Hi and hello everyone. Wishing all of you a blessed morning. I hope everyone is doing fine, staying strong despite the pandemic, restrictions and movement control order. Let us all pray that this pandemic will go away soon so that we can meet our pupils face to face. A quick introduction about myself. I am teacher Saraswati Subramaniam and I am currently teaching in SMK Gua Cempedak. It gives me an immense pleasure to be here with all of you today. Before I proceed, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to Jabatan Pendidikan Negeri Kedah and SSTP Negeri Kedah for giving this wonderful opportunity to me. Teachers, what is classroom assessment? Classroom assessment is an essential component of teaching and is defined as the process of collecting, synthesizing, and interpreting information to aid in classroom teaching and learning. Teachers assess pupils to identify how well they are developing all the four main skills and knowledge based on the skills. Classroom assessment also helps teachers to identify what they taught in the class and later proceed on the intervention if needed, and then plan on the activities based on pupils' levels of proficiency. By having classroom assessment, teachers can diagnose the pupils' strengths and weaknesses, measure pupils' progress, then review, re-strategize, and modify their teaching to enhance pupils' learning. There are two types of assessments, which are formative and summative. When we talk about formative assessment, we are actually referring to assessment for learning and assessment as learning. Meanwhile, summative assessment is assessment of learning. Dear teachers, assessment for learning is a part of teaching and learning process. The information obtained from this assessment is used as a strategy to improve pupils' future learning and understanding. Assessment as learning will be focusing on constructive feedback from the teacher and on developing pupils' capacity to self-assess and reflect on their future learning and understanding. Then, assessment of learning. Teacher make judgments about what the pupils have learned in relation to the teaching and learning goals. Should be comprehensive and reflect the learning growth over the time period being assessed. Dear teachers, classroom assessment is also a holistic assessment system conducted in schools by subject teachers to assess the pupils' cognitive, intellect, affective, emotional and spiritual, and psychomotor, which is physical aspect, in line with Malaysia's National Philosophy of Education and the standards-based school curriculum. By doing this, we create pupils who are complete in every aspect. Isn't that one of our responsibilities, teachers? Before I move on to the main subject matter today, I would like to briefly explain about some of the elements of classroom assessment. There are altogether 9 elements based on Buku Panduan Pelaksanaan PBD 2nd edition in page 10. The first element is classroom assessment is done using formative and summative assessment. which I explained earlier. Second and third, it is done systematically and planned by the teacher, where the teachers just enter the class and plan her lesson, determine the type of instrument, conducting the lesson, recording, analyzing, and doing follow-up plans and reporting. Next, it is criterion-based, where teachers assess pupils' performance based on content standard, learning standard, performance standard, and performance level. Another element is it focuses on the pupil's progress, and this is done based on pupils' ability and not by comparing the pupils. Next, the methods of assessments are done by observation, written, and oral assessments. After that, we do the interventions. We do the interventions to resolve pupils' weaknesses in learning and improve pupils' learning based on the findings. And finally, teachers, we encourage our pupils by having peer assessments and self-assessment. Dear teachers, does all this look familiar? Yes, I believe so. As an English language teacher, we can't escape referring to these materials as we plan our lesson plans, right? As we plan our lessons, we should always refer to scheme of work, document standard curriculum dan pentaksiran, the textbook, and not to miss Panduan Pelaksanaan Pentaksiran Bilik Darjah 2nd edition. By doing this, we will make sure we are in line when we are planning our classroom assessment. The content standard and the learning standard is derived from Scheme of Work Form 2 because my lesson today will be teaching speaking skills for Form 2 students. Next, for the lesson I am sharing later, I will be focusing on speaking skills, right? So, the content standards and the learning standards are derived from the DSKP2. Teachers, can you see? These are the performance standard guides for speaking skills, where I will be referring for my assessment today. We follow closely to the descriptors and assess our pupils based on that. Please be sure, teachers, to read and highlight the keywords and notes before we start planning for the assessment. This is crucial because we assess the pupils based on these criteria and award them wisely following the appropriate performance levels. I will be coming back to this slide again later after the activities. Next, here is the content standard and the learning standard that I am referring for my lesson today. For the speaking, for the content standard, main skills will be 2.1, communicate information, ideas, opinions, and feelings intangibly on familiar topics, and same goes to the complementary skill. As for the learning standard, the main skill will be 2.1.2, which is ask for and respond appropriately to simple suggestions. The complementary skill will be 2.1.4, which is express opinion about simple spoken or written advice given to themselves or others. The learning objective of today's lesson will be, by the end of the lesson, the pupils should be able to, number 1, learn or revise at least 6 out of 10 lists of words related to healthy lifestyle. Second, use appropriate communication strategies to ask and answer questions about healthy lifestyle. Teachers, as we plan our assessment, we should take into consideration the suitable methods of assessment. For this lesson today, the assessment could be done through observation and oral. There are more assessment skills and methods for every skill listed in the DSKP. Feel free to refer to them, teachers. It is very helpful for us to write these methods in the activities of the lesson, just to make sure we don't forget to do the assessment during or after the lesson. This is the overview of my lesson today. Lesson 94, topic Health and Well-being, under the theme Health and Environment. The level of the students will be intermediate. Here is the page which I'm referring today for today's lesson. Textbooks, Pulse 2, page 94. Dear teachers, for the set induction, we create fun and interesting activities so that we can gear the students for the lesson. They will have fun and they'll be excited about the topic that we are going to learn on that day. Having a good set induction will help us to get some prior knowledge of our pupils. Teachers, please remember that we do not take too much of time during the set induction. Alright, teachers, for my first activity, I am going to refer to Pulse 2, page 94, where students will be sitting with their friends. I choose Fun and Pick activity, which is under 21st century learning methods. The students will have the fun and go to their friends and ask them to pick a phrase. After they pick a phrase, they have to come up with the definition of the phrase. For example, the time you spend going out with friends, the friend will answer social life. Next, how you look. The answer will be appearance. During this time, teachers, the method of assessment that I use will be observation. What do I observe? I observe the vocabulary that they use to answer the questions. Do you get me, teachers? Right. Let's move on to activity number 2. This is where I am going to do my main assessment. Pupils take turns to ask and answer questions based on textbook. Questions on textbook. Teachers, remember, prior to the activity, I already teach them the phrases that they need to use during their conversation. This is where I am going to use my own instrument, teachers. Let's look at it now. This is the sample of pupils' assessment record, which I prepared for this lesson. I come up with my own checklist for this particular lesson. We'll be using this to award them the performance level according to learning standards. As you can see here, teachers, the descriptors here are able to use the phrases correctly in questions, able to use phrases correctly in answers, and that is the third one, able to conduct the conversation in a polite manner. Teachers, remember, when your pupil answer the questions or ask the questions, if they use a single word answer, which is yes or no, don't hesitate to give them performance level 1 or 2. Then, if some of your pupils give you answers in slightly longer sentences, we can always award them performance level 3 or 4. And teachers, what about some good pupils that you have in your class, some of them might come up with longer and complex sentences as they answer their friends' questions. So teachers, we can always award them performance level 5 or 6. We can refer back to the performance standard guide here again. See, performance level 1 and 2 to pupils hardly shows any ability to find out or communicate information. When they are lacking in vocabulary, they might not be able to answer the questions correctly. Then let's look at performance level 3 or 4. If this display good response in finding out and communicate information, we award them performance level 3 or 4. And if they display excellent response in finding out about and communicating information, yes, feel free to award them performance level 5 or 6. Teachers, here is the sample of my pupils' progress record, which I prepared for each of my classes. Each class will have at least one set of progress record where I list all their names and all the learning standards that they need to cover for each skill. By doing this, I can come up with different interventions, and based on the answers provided by them, I can also record their progress step by step. Teachers, why do we think we need this? Is it necessary? Yes, it is necessary. Particularly for speaking skill, there won't be any written evidence, right? So, by having a progress record with all the learning standards here, I can keep track of my pupils' performance. Then, after having done with the classroom assessment, at the end of the week or at the end of the month, we can transfer the level of performance in this way for easy reference and also as an evidence and to justify when needed. Teachers, as for the closure of my lesson on that day, I choose to have a parking lot method, which is again another 21st century learning method. Why do I choose this? So that we can use this strategy to assess the students where to get the input on how successful the day's lesson, so that we can replicate the lesson and carry out the same lesson with other classes with the same level of ability. Or we too can have a similar lesson with a different topic for the different classes. As a teacher, these are the repertoire of strategies that you can utilize in your classroom. Make wonders, teachers. There are a lot for you to choose. Okay, teachers. Next, another question. Where do we record the achievement of the pupils? Right. One way of doing is through your own preferred way, where we can keep track of them by using checklists in our record book. We can prepare the checklist as I showed to you earlier, where you record their progress step by step. Teachers too can have a stamp and stamp it in their exercise books so that you know you are done with the skill with them. Teachers, it is good to make a habit and make people aware of the assessment and write some anecdotes in their work at certain phase. This goes well for writing and reading skills. As for the speaking skills, video recording and compilation of people's work will be very suitable because teachers can play again the video to check with the descriptor so that teachers can award the pupils fairly. Another thing that the teacher can do is request the pupils to come up with a scrapbook for PBD, journals, or any kind of documentation. By having this type of recordings, you will not face problems when you are to complete the overall performance level at the end of the year. Recording the pupils' assessment can be used as a tool to validate our lessons and separate them by terms, which is January to June and July to November. Our administrators too can evaluate us easily because there is a justification for every skills that have been tested. Remember, teachers, these are in Buku Panduan PBD and teachers are required to refer to it always and keep it as our guidance. Dear teachers, one of the challenges that we are facing now is the implementation of classroom assessment during this movement control order. How did we go about it? Whether we like it or not, teaching and learning should take place regardless of this pandemic, right? With so many tutorials on Facebook and YouTube, I believe most of us would have become expert in creating wonders for our pupils. We can fully utilize the online platforms such as Google Meet, Zoom classes, classes using WhatsApp, and Telegram group, which is readily available in all of our smartphones. We can have quizzes in Google Forms, a simple test in Google Forms, where the teacher will get a direct feedback. Video or audio recording will be very useful for the pupils because if you want to test their speaking skills, we can always ask them to come up with a video according to the topic. Let's say we ask the students to come up with a cooking video for topic food, recycling video for the environment, and many other videos. Teachers, don't be surprised. Your pupils will come up with beautiful and wonderful videos, and upon sharing them in the social media, they will be more motivated to come up with better videos. PBL is another great way of doing assessment of 3 to 4 skills at one go. You can assess them in listening, reading, speaking, and writing at the same time. I know it is not easy, teachers, but I assure you, it is worth the try. Dear teachers, as the saying goes, to every beginning there is an ending. Now, I would like to take my leave. And last but not least, I wish you all the best in conducting classroom assessment, and hopefully my sharing today will give you some insights and inspiration. With that, I would like to sign off for today. Thank you and see you soon. Para penonton yang dikasihi, sila isikan maklum balas program di pautan seperti tertera di bawah. Sekian, terima kasih.